All right, hi everybody. So this is the first video in this two-part set talking about, sorry about that, talking about our review for this final for second semester. So let's start with the French Revolution. First things first, hi, I'm Maddie. I have first hour, so I am not some random person telling you about this information. So let's start with the French Revolution. That's page 1, and then about half, less than half of the back page of page 1 on the final review for Mrs. Ireland's class. So let's start. We're going to start with causes. So some causes of the revolution started with political causes. So if you remember from semester 1 and semester 2 and watching that very long documentary about the French Revolution and the steps to the revolution, you remember that the French people had little respect for the king because of the way that he was acting and some of the decisions that he made. So people did not respect him and his choices. Economic causes for the French Revolution. So because of France intervening in the American Revolution and doing some other things, they didn't have a lot of money. And generally, French peasants didn't have any food. And because they were members of the Third Estate, they had to pay the most taxes. So therefore, French peasants were poor and they didn't have the resources they needed. But this monarchy this old regime, they had money and they were wasting it. They were wasting it on lavish parties and this extravagant lifestyle. If you read about it, Versailles, to give you a little bit of context, like they had these crazy rituals. Like you would go and watch the king eat dinner and the royal family eat dinner, and you just observe. Like Versailles had some strange rules. And it had to do with like how much your status was, and it had to do with money. So basically, there's this huge divide between the common folk and the aristocracy. So we're going to talk about the old regime. So the old regime is this monarchy, this monarchy under King Louis XVI. This long-standing Bourbon monarchy, one of the longest in Europe. I'm just looking at the Enlightenment and French Revolution exam review from when this exam actually happened earlier this semester. Just making sure that I can bring some like other ideas from that into it, just not so that you get a little bit more rounded information from this video. But the old regime was the aristocracy. So here's, I think this is a pretty good graphic that represents some of the different causes of the French Revolution. So you can see these political, economic, social, and intellectual causes. And we'll talk a little bit how these long-term intellectual causes of the French Revolution, this Enlightenment idea, kind of ends up tying into revolutions later on in 1848 in Italy and Germany and France again. So another one of the things that they're mentioning is these 4 stages of revolution. So liberal reform, that is when you have the National Assembly and the tennis court oath and just those radical changes, the like removal of this monarchy and this aristocracy. And then radical bloodletting is the reign of terror. It's when the next person that we're going to talk about actually takes control, and he basically murders anyone who opposes him. And then reaction to violence. That is when the National Assembly takes down Robespierre, and they kill him. They also kill Marat, and it's this like we have to kill you to end this radical bloodletting and this radical liberal reform. And then one strong leader emerges. You need to know that is Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon the First, the Emperor of France. We'll talk a little bit about Napoleon II, his nephew. Is an interesting guy. But so basically, a general idea that you need to get out of a cause of the revolution is France does not have money, and it has this long-standing aristocracy. So this is Maximilian Robespierre. Hi, that's a portrait of him. So if you remember again, this is the guy who started. He has this fanatical speaking ability. He can talk really, really well, and he can write a lot. And he basically is in control of the Reign of Terror. So in 1793, he executes Queen Marie Antoinette. Well, first he executes King Louis XVI, and then he executes Marie Antoinette, effectively ending this monarchy completely. So storming of the Bastille is kind of the thing that starts it all. It's like this major event that is still an event that France celebrates every year, July 14th, 1789. So the thing that we need to remember about the Bastille and why it's so important that they stormed this specific place. The Bastille is this huge prison, and it's holding just people, and it represents this old regime in that it's this long-standing building, and it's known for its torture of the average man, and it is oppression, and it's just what it kind of just represents this entire old regime overall and its oppression of the average French people. So when it's stormed, they get munitions and everything, and that's what people think about. But really, it is the oppression that you really need to know about the Bastille. So this is a kind of, I think this is a good graphic to kind of show what the different estates were and why the third estate did not like where their position was. So this is a graphic of the Estates-General. It was this unfair system that basically put the Catholic clergy, they had the most power over everyone. And the first and second estates had huge amounts of power with a smaller percentage of the population of France. And they didn't have to pay those taxes, which did not fare well. And so in 1789, King Louis XVI summons the Estates-General for the first time in a very long time. And it's over economic reform. There were some hunger strikes, and basically Louis XVI needed to gain control over France again, and so he calls this National Assembly. And the Third Estate does not like what's coming out of this, so they leave and they do the tennis court oath. They basically swear that they're going to create a new, oh my God, I've been saying this National Assembly this entire time. Okay, going back, this is the Estates-General, not the National Assembly. I am so dumb. I'm sorry. It has been a long day. This is the Estates-General, different estates. God, my brain just farted. Sorry, guys. So the tennis court oath. God, how did I screw that up? The tennis court oath is basically when the people from the Third Estate who are getting treated unfairly in the Estates-General go off. Thanks, Mom. Nice. They go off and they go to a tennis court really, really closely by. It's a big enough building to hold all of these people from the Third Estate, and they propose that they're going to write a constitution and create a national assembly where everyone is equal. So the tennis court oath is another very important event in the timeline of the French Revolution. So that's all that we talk about in the study guide. I would still go back and look at your notes over Enlightenment and French Revolution. If you have time, watch the crash courses. Watch Extra Credits does really good series. I don't know if they have one over the French Revolution. just go and absorb more information and just kind of go in with an open mind and learn a little bit more before you take this test. So moving on, we're going to the 19th century. This is the one that we had that project over, this video project. So we're going to answer the question of how this relates to World War I. I'm not making another video over World War I because I made that one for that test. I would still go back and watch it. You can listen to me figure out the date for 20 minutes. No, so we're going to talk a little bit now about the 19th century and just kind of what we need to know about this specific time in European history. Okay, so first things first, I like to talk a lot about unification. Unification was the thing that I really liked to learn about. It was something that I didn't know all that much about until I came in, and I learned a little bit about it. So I'm going to talk about German unification, and then I'm going to talk about Italian unification. So basically, what you need to know about German unification is that it has some causes. Nationalism. In 1848, there were these liberal and nationalists in this German Confederation that wanted to unite the 39 states of Germany. And Otto von Bismarck was actually initially opposed to this. He wanted a monarchy in Germany, and he was from Prussia. He was afraid that if they united all of the German-speaking states, that Austria would dominate over his home state of Prussia. So Bismarck was opposed initially, and then he kind of changes his tune a little bit when he realizes that he can do this without involving Russia. So why did I say Russia? God, I can't talk, guys. I'm sorry. Without involving Austria. So one of the major causes that we have these 39 random German states is the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved, leading to Central Europe being kind of just a mess of German-speaking people. So some causes and events in unification that lead to a united Germany in 1871 is first, I don't have this on here, but the I'm going to screw this up. Sorry, people who are in German. Schleswig-Holstein conflict. So basically, Bismarck wants to annex this part of the Netherlands called Schleswig and Holstein, and he enlists Austria to help him out. He's like, "Hey, we're friends. You can get territory. Let's go kick some butt in the Netherlands." And so they take over Schleswig and Holstein, and then Austria gets kicked around a little bit, and Bismarck gains Schleswig and Holstein for Prussia, and that doesn't make Austria happy. So then Austria and Prussia go to war. Austria is completely smashed. The major thing that you need to know about this is Bismarck says to Austria he won't invade Vienna if they agree to not participate in a unified Germany. So basically, this keeps Austria from unifying with the rest of Germany, allowing for Prussia to be the dominating state. Exactly what Bismarck wanted. So with this, he dissolves the German Confederation, and he creates this Northern German Confederation with all the Northern Germanic states after the annexation of Schleswig and Holstein and the Austro-Prussian War. And France. So Bismarck was like, "Hey, is it okay if I go to war with Austria?" And France is like, "Yeah, sure." France being Napoleon III in this situation. But Napoleon III says, "Yeah, go to war. You can do that. Go do that." And when he doesn't get something out of it, he's like, "Hey, that's not cool." And when something happens with the succession of Spain, it basically gives Napoleon III a cause to go to war with Prussia. Prussia destroys France. Basically, they siege Paris after they capture Napoleon III, and the provisional government surrenders, leading Germany to be declared united in Versailles in 1871. Some long-term events. Basically, if Germany hadn't unified, if Bismarck hadn't made these decisions that he did, we wouldn't have World War I and World War II. Because Hitler admired Bismarck and his strong ways. So he took inspiration from Bismarck. So that's how it leads to World War II. And France and Germany, this kind of adds to this France and Germany kind of like butting heads and not liking each other. So here's a little graphic that shows the German unification. Another thing that what is so important, why I was talking about Enlightenment ideas and how it affects this, is basically liberal and socialist ideas coming from this like idea and Enlightenment filled time leads to liberals in 1848 wanting to unify Germany, and that's kind of how everything starts. So with Italian unification, so Italy is a really old country. It's not as a unified country, no, it isn't all that old, but as a place and like kind of what we think about with what Italy is, it's kind of like you think about it, it goes back to the Roman times and before then even. So let's talk about some causes of Italian unification. So there's 4 separate states at the very beginning of this entire situation. So yeah. I'm just looking through this just to see. I will talk about, don't worry, I will talk about the economic stuff that I've mentioned. I'm just going to go over unification because I think it's pretty important, and I know we should probably learn a bit about it. So, Italy has 4 different separate city-states at this time, and most of these city-states were being ruled by outside countries, by the Habsburgs in Austria and the Bourbons in France. So, like if you remember in the Renaissance, we get these figures that kind of represent a united Italy. Machiavelli, for example, kind of was an example of someone who would be a voice for a united Italy. So when Napoleon invades Italy, he leads this French liberal government in control of Italy and kicks out the Austrians and the Bourbons, leading to kind of a liberal idea. And so people realized that under Napoleon, they had a good time after Napoleon was kicked out, of course. And so, of course, nationalism always can be tied to causes of unification, because if you don't have a national identity, you can't create a nation. So some people who is involved. So Mazzini, Giuseppe Mazzini. Again, I take French, so I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing everything wrong. He had argued that the nation was a divine device, and it was ordained by God. So he believed that romantic nationalism he believed in a romantic kind of nationalism. Remember romanticism? So I would suggest, again, going back and looking at your different 19th century isms notes, because that can also really help with this. So then we have Cavour, Camillo di Cavour. He was the prime minister of the parliament. So Italy has a revolution in 1848, like pretty much all the countries of Europe does. And he rejects romantic nationalism. He, like Bismarck, believes that Italy can only be united through force. So he goes to wars, and he believes that Sardinia has to lead the battle. So Sardinia You guys know where Sardinia is, right? Right? Right, okay. Sardinia is a little island. So, you know. He also believed that you have to influence, you have to weaken the papacy to create a united Italy. So he's pretty cool. So he brings, they decide to fight a war to unite Italy. And there's another guy we need to talk about, Garibaldi. Garibaldi is the guy and the man on the field. He isn't all that interested in politics, but he is a military person. So when Sardinia declares war against the Austrians to get them out of a part of Italy, it starts there's 3 different wars of Italian unification, and so after all of this, so Garibaldi is in control of Naples and Cavour, and Victor Emmanuel, the eventual king of a unified Italy. They're from the north. There's only when they have everything else. There's only one thing that isn't unified. That is Rome, which is still being controlled by France until Napoleon III goes to war with Germany in 1870, which allows the Italians to invade and take over Rome. So what they wanted originally was a republican government. It fails, and Victor Emmanuel is still it's a constitutional monarchy essentially, and there's still divides between conservatism and the conservative upper echelons of society and a more liberal lower class. And to this day, Italy is not the most culturally unified of countries. You can still see some differences in different city-states. So here's a little timeline. It's pretty cute, right? So we need to talk again about imperialism and nationalism. So imperialism is still with this entire part of the packet. Imperialism, it's basically the actions taken by countries to expand their territory. So a really cool example is India and the race to Africa, the cutting up of Africa. And there's this kind of idea that comes out of this, that there's a white man's burden. Rudyard Kipling wrote The White Man's Burden. So go check that out. He's a Brit. So basically, why we care about imperialism in the grand scheme of history is that it expands territory, yes, but it also puts influence in different parts of the world. So it's a sphere of influence. I guess now is the best time to talk about spheres of influence. So I'm going to talk about Hong Kong, I think, because that's the best one that I can talk about, because I can just go off to just explain what a sphere of influence is. So spheres of influence are when European countries would go into another country and they'd be like, hey, how about I influence you politically and economically, but you're still your own government? So it's not like they completely took it over. They just kind of influenced it. So Hong Kong was a sphere of influence. If you think about that, you could learn about Hong Kong is cool. I'm getting off topic, guys. I'm sorry. So basically, this eventually leads to World War I and communism. Communism. Guys, I'm tired. I'm sorry. It led to Cold War issues and things like that. So nationalism, guys. I've talked a bit about nationalism, talking about how it led to a united Germany and a united Italy, and so basically, national identity comes before anything else with nationalism. So you can see German unification, Pan-Slavism with World War I when we talked about that, and Italian unification. So nationalism, it can be a good and a bad thing. It's a cause of World War I. So Slavic nationalism leads to issues leading up to World War I. It's, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand comes from a group of Slavic nationalists. And yeah, so that's why we care. I guess now it's time for me to talk about Bismarck. Kingdom of Sardinia, Berlin Conference, Foreign War Swirl. 34 and 35 on the back. Balkans were a trouble spot in the early 1900s, in part because they received their independence from the Ottoman Empire after the Crimean War, and it leads to kind of some instability in the area because they'd never been independent, but they hadn't been independent in a very long time. Bismarck, I talked about him. The Iron Chancellor. A unified Germany will be forged in iron and blood. He's pretty cool. I like talking about him. Bismarck's pretty interesting. All right. Old imperialism. Explain the similarities and differences between old imperialism and new imperialism. There's a lot of, I guess, economic. They're trying to spread their economic influence still. It's still about bringing things home to the mother country. Like, if you think about Columbian exchange, like you would go into the United States, what would become the United States, and you would take out like tobacco and you would trade it with Europe. And they still were doing that. It was like you were taking the natural resources and you were using it to your advantage. So I said I'd talk about the different isms. So I'm going to talk about Marxism, laissez-faire economics, and the bourgeoisie. Okay, number one under 19th century, Karl Marx was the guy who wrote about socialism. I believe he also wrote the Communist Manifesto. So he believes that he believes in command economy. So I'm going to talk about. Sorry guys if this isn't all that helpful. I'm trying. Laissez-faire economics. I remember Mrs. Gerling, my history teacher in 8th grade, always was like, laissez-faire, hands off. It's basically saying laissez-faire is a French term, if you can see by the spelling. And basically, laissez-faire economics believes that if governments and people just keep out and just let the economy do its thing, capital and demand and supply and demand kind of will grow. It doesn't take into account talking about oh my god, guys, I'm sorry, corporations and trusts, which we don't need to talk about because that was all about last year. Adam Smith, you need to link with capitalism. He believes in this market economy. So a command economy. Think about like the Soviet Union and basically any communist government. It's really the pre-World War II Nazi, to tie it more with what we've been talking about, pre-World War II German and kind of Nazi economy was quite a bit of a command economy. It ended up leading to Germany being more productive. I think it's like, yeah, just Soviet communism is a good example. Traditional economy, that's with the farmers on estates, kind of your fun and fresh guy from the Middle Ages. God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So unions. We remember unions from last year, right, guys? Right. Okay. Unions, band of people come together and they're like, if you don't meet, we're here to protect these workers so that you can't exploit us. Because corporations are greedy. Not gonna lie. So unions are pretty cool. Liberal in an idea. Corporations, corporations and monopolies. Corporations, where they band together. They have a lot. It's a big business. Monopolies is when one specific company has control over an entire market, has control over everything that has to do with that product. So Standard Oil, if you remember from last year, isn't a monopoly. I just did. Just talked about Standard. My mom's meddling with my video. She's being weird. Division of labor. Division of labor. God, guys, I'm sorry. I'll have to look up that one. But I'm sorry. I can't put everything in a video, especially if I don't have everything done on mine. Mass production. It's really with the Industrial Revolution. We go from having this putting out system where you do the work in your house and you put it out, and you go to these major factories and they produce just incredible amounts of product, and it leads to the supply and demand kind of situation. If you can make more product for cheaper, you make more money. Yeah. The first business to industrialize, if you remember, was the textile industry. Textiles, clothing. Unlike Britain, many European nations were slow to industrialize because of political conservatism. Industrialization was slow in Germany until probably, sorry guys, I'll have to look that one up. Yes, Adam Smith said that if demand for a product increased, the price could increase as well. Country in which the Industrial Revolution began was Britain, Great Britain. Division of labor, mass production, and the assembly lines were features of the Industrial Revolution. Yes, okay. Well, guys, that's all I have for you tonight. Sorry about that last part. I will get that World War II video up as soon as possible. I have to start work on that. But, friends, it has been a great journey. We are so close. Guys, we have 3.5 days left of school. So, I will hopefully have that World War II video up on my channel probably by the end of tomorrow, so you can use to study. If you have any questions, talk to me in person. I'm usually, I don't know, if we have advisory, I'm in Miss Smithy's room. If we have Titan time, I'm either in Miss Cassidy's room or the newspaper room. So you can talk to me there if you have any questions. You know what? If you guys want me to go to Mrs. Ireland's room during Titan time on Tuesday, just shoot me a text or an email. So yeah, go look. Those are all the things that you can communicate with me on. I will have the World War II video up very soon. Yeah. So, in the comment section below, sound off. What questions do you have? Are you guys ready for school to be over? Personally, I just need to sleep more. I have lost so much sleep. But this video is basically over. Bye. Have a great night. I will see you guys soon. Peace out, home slices.